Let me take you back to that first thread, unraveling in my life a single missed rent payment. Have you ever felt the cold grip of dread in your chest, knowing eviction might be around the corner? That was me, Rachel Miller, in a cramped Chicago apartment, rain lashing at the windows, counting crumpled bills and praying for a miracle. It's easy to say, just ask for help, but when each phone call to family brings more shame, and your partner's eyes are clouded by failure, the walls close in. Now, you might be thinking, why didn't Daniel just get any job? Fast food, retail. Trust me, those thoughts gnawed at us every day. But the job market felt rigged, my husband facing rejection after rejection, and our little safety net, what economists call a liquidity buffer, was gone. Each night, I lay awake, haunted by the specter of homelessness, my sense of responsibility battling raw terror. In that crucible, the line between right and wrong began to blur. And then, enter Mr. Carter, our landlord, a man who could freeze a river with a glance. He wasn't cruel, just clinical, the embodiment of cold utility. When he offered a way to settle the debt that didn't require cash, well, have you ever been so desperate you'd consider the unthinkable? I told myself it was only temporary, what behavioral economists call moral licensing, giving yourself permission to breach your own code for the sake of survival. But it didn't feel temporary. It felt like crossing a threshold you can never uncross. So there I was, wrestling with impossible choices. Protect my marriage or protect our home? Is there any right answer when the world is closing in? That's the storm I found myself in, and it set the stage for everything that came next. The moment I stepped into Mr. Carter's sterile office, I felt like I was walking into a courtroom, except this time, I was the defendant, jury, and executioner all in one. The deal was unspoken but crystal clear. Isn't it strange how silence can be louder than words? My hands shook as I offered myself in exchange for our home, a transaction no contract could legitimize. But desperation sealed it nonetheless. This was transactional ethics at its darkest. Now, some of you listening might be asking, Rachel, why not just confess to Daniel? Why shoulder this burden alone? I asked myself that too. But shame is a corrosive force. It's like an acid eating away at trust, at love, at your very sense of self. I told myself, once Daniel finds a job, I'll stop. But every month, the arrangement continued, and the lie grew heavier. It reminded me of the concept of incremental compromise, crossing one small line, then another, until you barely recognize yourself. Let me tell you, the relief I felt when the rent was paid was as real as the guilt that hollowed me out. For a brief moment, survival felt like victory. But at what cost? I'd become a stranger in my own skin, turning every glance in the mirror into an accusation. And so, I lived with the secret, clutching it like a talisman, trying to convince myself that survival justified everything. But you'd be amazed how secrets have a way of clawing themselves into daylight. The storm wasn't over. In fact, it was just gathering force. They say confession is good for the soul, but what happens when that confession detonates your world? Daniel's question, how did you pay the rent? Was innocent, on the surface, but I could see the suspicion lurking, like a crack forming in glass. Have you ever tried to lie to someone who knows you better than you know yourself? My excuse, flimsy as tissue paper, barely held for a week. When the truth finally spilled out sobbing, shaking, desperate, I watched the man I loved turn to stone before my eyes. You betrayed me. Those 3 words didn't just end a conversation, they split my life in 2. In psychology, they call this attachment rupture. It's the moment trust shatters, and every shared memory suddenly feels suspect. Now, you might be thinking, couldn't Daniel see you did it for him? But pain isn't rational. When your heart is broken, logic flees the room. For days, Daniel vanished, no calls, no messages. I wandered our apartment in silence, haunted by echoes, replaying every moment that led us here. When he finally returned, the ground between us was scorched. Our words became weapons, every silence a minefield. We tried therapy, what therapists call reparative work, but the breach was too deep. Our marriage became a ghost ship, adrift and rudderless. In the end, Daniel and I parted ways. Not with rage, but with a sorrow that felt like gravity. Some scars just don't heal. I moved out, carrying the weight of my choices, a lesson written in heartbreak and survival. Because sometimes, the greatest battles are fought in the quiet, desperate corners of our own hearts.